Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Well, here we are again, my favorite organization, and it's, of course, called Faith Farm Ministries. And today, I'm going to be talking with Pastor Douglas LIDWELL, who is the director of the Fort Lauderdale campus of Faith Farm Ministries. Welcome to our show, Pastor.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, so I was just saying to the pastor before we got on the show that the one thing about Faith Farm, when you donate, whether it's money or goods or something, you know where it's going. You know that it's going to go to help other human beings. So when you see these people, on I-95 at the stops and you think that, they ask you for money, I always want to stop and say, wait a minute, go call Faith Farm, they're going to help you.
Yeah, there is a fine line between being helpful to people and enabling them to stay the way they are. And in the recovery community, when you're dealing with addiction, which is what we're talking about, you're talking usually about family members, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, and moms and dads, and what you want to do is help. You love this person. Unfortunately, you can love them right into a grave, because if you take money out of your pocket and give it to them in order to go use drugs, that's money they don't have to spend on the food or whatever it was you're going to buy for them, and then they can go spend that on drugs.
Yeah.
So in the recovery community, the help that you want to give someone is absolutely, I will help you. I will drive you to rehab. I will put you in the car myself and take you to detox. I will buy a bus ticket and put your hind end on a bus. And if you're hungry, I'll stop at the drive-thru on the way there, but I'm not going to give you a place in my home to shower up and shave. I'm not going to let you sleep on the couch in my basement. I'm not going to, whatever it would be that you're going to spend money on, because that's enabling them to stay the way they are. And so we want to make sure that every bit of support and aid that we give to people is to make them go get the help they need in order to turn their lives around, and not enable them to stay that way any longer. And so when people donate to the farm or give of their goods or their time or their prayers to Faith Farm Ministries, they know that it is being used to help people get the life-changing transformation that they need. And it's not just going to enable people to stay the way they are.
So, Pastor LIDWELL, as I'm watching you and I'm listening, this just didn't start and come out of the blue with you. I can tell that when even you were a kid, you had some sort of a calling, didn't you?
It has been said. I came late to faith. I was born again at the tender age of 37. And before that, I was a totally secular man with a secular worldview. And
what were you doing?
I have a background in broadcasting, oddly enough.
Oh, I love it. So I have to be careful now,
and
right?
in advertising and marketing.
Oh, really?
And I served as a sales manager at a number of radio stations in my home state of Illinois. And so I have my first day in college, I had two questions: where do we eat, and how do I get involved in radio? And that was so. That was my background before that, and I was a totally secular person. I had no interest in church or the things of God or spirituality in any way. And I can remember driving past churches and thinking, oh, those poor superstitious people, don't they know there are other things to be doing? And now look at me. I am a born-again son of Father God. I am a teacher of the gospel. I am a minister of salvation and recovery. And there's been a complete and utter transformation in my life, to the point where my friends from college don't even know what to make of me. I've been completely transformed by God's grace. And that's what we do at Faith Farm Ministries, is we take people with life-controlling issues, in this case, drugs and alcohol addiction, and we teach them how to be transformed by God's grace. This isn't a matter of...
A lot of them are religious already, but somehow it didn't matter, did it?
I take an informal poll, a show of hands, because I teach the first of the 4 phases of the program, and so I get a feel. I did that again just this week because we're starting a new class. Mm. And I would guess that about 2/3 to 3/4 of them were raised in church.
Right.
And so they have some form of a biblical background, whether that's Catholic or Lutheran or Methodist or what have you.
So what happens?
Well, what happens is that...
Life happens.
No. Religion happens. Yeah. And that becomes a performance-based, you must live up to this standard or else kind of deal. And that is not at all God's heart, first of all. and it is not at all conducive to a healthy lifestyle. And we find that many of the people who come in our gates got into that shape because of the futility of attempting to live up to a religious standard that is imposed by man and man's tradition and isn't biblical. And I would say probably, I don't want to overestimate it, but almost half of our ministry is helping people overcome their religion so they can enjoy a vibrant faith in Jesus Christ without all the trappings.
Wow, that's a big statement. So let's get back though to you, and when people do come, do you see them first, or first there's an intake?
We have an intake process with an intake counselor. When they fill out the application online at faithfarm.org, and they can choose any of our 3 campuses or the women's campus at the Boynton Beach location.
Judy Blake Walters is watching.
Hey Judy, we love you.
And now we have another person, some other person too. So you're famous already. Go ahead. And
so they go through that intake process, which can take a few hours, up to a couple of days, because our intake counselor wants to make sure it's someone who's really ready. Everybody who comes to us knows that they need recovery, but not everybody really wants it. And the one person we can't help is the person who doesn't want help. I believe that anyone can be helped through a process of recovery, but not if they don't really want it. If it's just a matter of, well, she's thrown me out and she won't let me back in until I go somewhere.
Is that common?
Oh, it's very common. or the judge has required me, or you know what it is. Those folks don't really want help, and we try to screen for that in the intake process. But in general, if people have a genuine desire to come, we're gonna let them come, and our program is completely free of charge. It's a 10-month program, and we feed them, clothe them, house them, and everything, and it's completely free. We never ask for a dime. So we want to screen them up front and make sure they are good, strong candidates. They also need to be willing to adopt a biblical worldview, no longer a secular worldview. The thinking of the world is what got you into this mess. And so you need to be willing. I'm not saying you think you're able, but you're willing to adopt a Christian biblical worldview. And if we have someone who's willing, and it's like, okay, as the pastor, it's my job to show them that it's all true, and they can trust that it's true and believe. But if they're not even open to that, we really can't help them, because the only thing that is going to help someone overcome something as serious as addiction or other sorts of life-controlling issues is by a life in union with our Creator.
One thing that I have noticed at the graduations is that they are so touched by what their life has been there, and they've made such close friends with one another. It's such a bonding.
It really is. My son is a United States Marine, and if you know anybody that is a veteran, they will tell you that the men that they went through basic training with, and the men that they were in combat with, and the men that they were in the barracks with, these are lifelong bonds. And you will see people come through Faith Farm Ministries, and they start out with a group of up to 50, even 60 people, and over the course of 10 months, that'll get narrowed down to where we're going to graduate 12 to 15 usually. And those that make it, they go through a process similar to those who have been through combat together. Because this is for one thing, it's a very difficult program. It asks a lot of them. They have to stretch in ways they never thought they would. They have to grow very, very quickly. And so they go through a lot together, and they learn to lean on one another. Even those who might not like each other personality-wise, they learn to trust one another and be there for one another and pour into each other's life and speak into each other. And they walk out of there with sometimes lifelong bonds.
Okay, so let's just say that's happened to someone. Now they're out on their own.
Yeah.
You're hoping that they're going to carry that same attitude and aptitude with them, aren't you?
And we want them to spread the word. We want to take what they received at Faith Farm and spread it wherever they go for the rest of their days, into every interaction with another human being, in every relationship, in their workplace, in their family, in their career, in their hobby, everywhere that they go for the rest of their days. We want them to exhibit and demonstrate the personality and character of Jesus Christ. And that's going to help other people who struggle with addiction be drawn to them and seek help themselves.
So what if they graduate, but you don't quite think that they're ready, even though they've been through this long program? Do you ask them to stick with it again?
We actually, at our campus, we have a number of ways that people can stay on for longer after their graduation. And when we arrived here 6 years ago, I would guess 90% of graduates would leave on graduation day. Their families would arrive and go to the graduation service with them, hear their testimony, and be a big, applause thing. Then they would go out to lunch. They would pack their bags and they're down the road. They're on the plane, whatever the case may be. Today, it's been flipped. About 90% of our graduates here at the Fort Lauderdale campus stay on after graduation in one of several ways. We have what we call the Omega program, which is sort of a halfway house. And you can continue to live on our campus there on Powerline Road between Oakland Park and Sunrise. And you can live there while you go to college, trade school or college. And it comes with a meal plan and everything else. And you have to pay a little bit of a rent there, but it's less than you would pay at a halfway house anywhere in town. And there's zillions of halfway houses in Fort Lauderdale. You could also go to work from there and go ahead and get a job and save a little money so that you're ready to get last month's rent and deposit to get your utilities turned on as you move off into the real world. And you have some time there, some months. So we've had people stay over a year for that. We also have what's called the Advanced Student Program. And that's where just a handful of individuals that we have selected as a staff and invited to stay and taken them through an observation and application process. We'll invite them to stay on for another year and give back a year of their lives to help the men who are coming up in the program behind them.
Oh, that's superb.
And these, you would think that these are going to be older guys who are well seasoned. No, we've had very young men who come through, but they've shown a level of spiritual and personal growth that we want the other guys to get. And we'll invite them to stay on and help out in the various departments around the farm, whether it's in the kitchen or maintenance or wherever, and really be there to help us minister to these guys. And it's one thing for me to step up and be ministering recovery to people who struggle with addiction, but it's a whole other thing for a guy who 10 months ago had a top bunk second floor address and say 10 months ago I was where you are, and that has real impact.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see where that would happen. So this is wonderful. I just want to tell everybody else again. So this is Pastor. The first name, of course, I'll tell you that, but it's Pastor Douglas Lidwell. He's director of the Fort Lauderdale campus at Faith Farm Ministries. Let me give you a website. It's a beautiful website. You can help right there on the website. You can find out what you need to know. faithfarm.org. It is a not-for-profit, and they do need money. They always need money because they have to support 400 and some odd people, 400 something, I forget what it was exactly.
Between the three farms, it's over 450 beds.
Right. And that takes a lot of money, and as Pastor said, there's no money that you have to pay, but it's so unbelievable that some people just can't get through it because they're just not ready. And as you said, and there are many times the parents will call, I know my son needs you, and I've heard before from some of the interviews here that they have to sometimes be so down and out. I mean, some of the women that you hear what they've been through, they're
tragic.
just not ready.
The ravages on the body of addiction, chemical dependency, are absolutely enormous, and it's even worse on a woman's body than on a man's.
Yeah.
And so a woman needs much more in the way of health care and so on when she has suffered from addiction. The aging you can see in just a few years of addiction. You can have someone who starts out in her early 20s. In just a few years of addiction, she would look like she's in her 40s or 50s. It's just ravaging what this epidemic is doing to people. And
well, let's move before this epidemic of opioids. It really used to be alcohol. It wasn't the drugs, or it was a different kind of drug then, right? But alcohol is how the founder started this.
Right.
What didn't he?
Right. Our founder is the Reverend Garland Eastham, and we all just affectionately call him Pappy. And he and a friend were out one evening, and they saw a guy drunk on the side of the road in 1951. And so they scooped him up, took him home, gave him some coffee, ministered the gospel to him. The man received Christ, was saved, and the next day, having sobered him up, they sent him back out. The next night, they were out looking for someone else. And that's how this whole thing started. Then they entered into a mission in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And then they outgrew that very quickly and bought land way, way, way out on the outskirts of town, which is now called Powerline. Really, they had to buy a truck because people started doing that, and that's how the whole thrift store model started. And so for 68 years, not one student at Faith Farm Ministries has ever had to pay for their stay. Not one meal, not one night of air conditioning, nothing. It has all been supported by the donations of the people of our community, and we're so grateful for their prayers and support over these years, because every bit of it goes to help these men in their recovery.
Well, and the other part, when you were talking about the women, when I go attend graduations and I hear what the poor women have gone through, but I think about, actually, my my husband, who has passed away 2 years ago, but he had his first wife, apparently, was a school teacher, and this is in California, and could have been in the 40s, I don't remember, but she was an alcoholic, and they kept finding her in the street, and he it was very hard for him. He kept trying to do something good until one night he said that he awakened and she had a knife there, and he was afraid she was going to probably kill him one time. So he did have to send her back to her family, and I'm sure there were other missions in other places, but it didn't work for her, and she wound up dying on the street. So that was the only time I had ever heard about something that was close to in my world. But it still didn't make the impression that it's made when I attend your graduations, and of course your homecomings are not to be believed. I mean, they're so powerful, and the speakers that you get, and everyone is not afraid to talk about who they are and what they've been through, which I think is amazing. I guess it's because they want so much to help other people, and they think by their own story they'll help other people.
There's a saying in the recovery community that you are only as sick as your secrets.
I never heard that before.
And it is so
Wow.
true. And what we find is that when you will go in and sometimes against your own will, if you will just dig in deep and pull those secrets out and expose them, it removes their ability to hold you back any longer.
So what's the secret?
Well, the secret is maybe whatever is in your past that you don't want anyone to know about. You know, we all have that place where we just don't go there. I'll talk about this, but there's this, we just don't go there. And if you'll get that out, you remove its power to control you. I minister in phase 4 of our 4-phase program, an inner healing exercise called Houses, where men will go to a whiteboard and draw out their life story, everything that's ever happened to them and everything that they've ever done. And it always comes back to the upper left corner of the board where they start. Wherever you started out, where you grew up, in those first early 6 to 12 years of your life, where those wounds happened. And people expose some of the most horrific crimes against humanity that you've ever heard. I can't even tell you those stories. And in that context, I had a young man come to me 1.5 years ago, and he said, "Pastor, I've been with these guys in my class now for 7 months, but there's something in my past that I cannot share. I cannot. Could I just tell you about it privately?" And I said, of course. And so we set an appointment. We came back to my office, and we took about an hour, and he laid out the story. And immediately, as soon as he began, I was breathless. And you must understand, as a pastor of 15 years, I've heard it all. But when his story began, I was speechless. And he got that story out. I thanked him for his courage. I told him how much I honored him for that, and I understood completely why he didn't want to share that with his class. The next day, he went up to that whiteboard, and he told his whole class
I have goosebumps sitting
what
here.
before he couldn't
heavens.
tell anyone. Within a week, he was ministering it in the dorms to other men who had gone through the same sort of thing. It is now part of his testimony that he shares in churches wherever he goes in the Southwest United States.
And it's pretty bad stuff, right?
And because it's horrific if I told you what his parents had done to him. Now this is something that he has, because he was able to get out his secrets. They can no longer control him, and he's actually able to use them to help others who've suffered the same forms of abuse. It's unlike anything you've ever seen. He's been healed of this wound by getting it out. Well, the Bible says it this way in James chapter 5. Confess your sins one to another that you may be healed. This isn't confessing your stuff to God so he'll forgive you. He forgave you at the cross. This is so that you can receive healing. And when you get your stuff out, you get healed. If you're only as sick as your secrets, if you have no more secrets, well, we know this in the secular world. Every time somebody wants to run for president, what do? They write a memoir. And they tell on themselves so that there's no way some reporter can crawl up their hind end with a microscope and get stuff on them. right? You're going to say, well, you can't get me with that. That's in my book. That's chapter 4 of my book. And you can't be gotten. Your enemy has nothing to latch onto if you've already exposed
I never thought about that. So secrets are very powerful in everyone's life.
And we all have them, and we all have to expose them. Everything that's hidden in the darkness needs to be brought to the light so you can be healed of it. It is these issues that we all cope with. We all develop coping mechanisms. There is a stigma of addiction, that these guys are low lives, and that's nonsense. What I would like all of your listeners to know is that every human being on earth has a coping mechanism for dealing with the junk of life. And some become workaholics, and we praise them as captains of industry. Others will throw themselves into hobbies and sports or whatever. Everybody finds a way to deal with the pain of living in a fallen world. The guys at our farm just happen to choose a coping mechanism that is particularly self-destructive in drugs or alcohol or other addictive behaviors, and that has caused a breakdown in family and other relationships. That's all. We all do it.
Yeah.
Mine is food. I mean, look at me. I'm a walrus over here.
No, you're not. You know, Dr. Lidwell, I'm a doctor. Well, that sounds like you're
Not
a doctor.
yet.
I know,
Not
that's
yet.
okay, but you sound like it. Well, Pastor Lidwell, I know now why you're so successful. You are so energetic and so enthusiastic and so charismatic. So I'm sure they're very lucky. How did you wind up at Faith Farm?
You know, my wife and I were living in her hometown of Huntington, West Virginia, which used to be a wonderful little middle-class town. If you've ever seen the movie We Are Marshall about the football team
Yes.
that died in the plane crash in 1970,
Yes.
that's her hometown, Marshall University, the Thundering Herd. That's where she grew up. And at the time, it was a wonderful little middle-class town, but today it is the heroin capital of the world.
No fooling.
You wouldn't make that up. And this little town of 60,000 people, including the campus, has suffered so hideously under this epidemic. And so we were there, and it was late in 2012, early 13, and we were serving at a very large church there, the largest church in the state, while at the same time at her
you were
parents...
a pastor there?
No, we were just helping out,
Oh, okay.
volunteering.
Okay.
And I was teaching some classes and so on. I was running camera on the Wednesday night services. She's playing piano also at her parents' Baptist church, and so we're connected to both. And we're just doing all the stuff that we can possibly be doing while working other jobs. And we kind of just felt a call of the Lord to more full-time ministry. And I was like, I don't know how that's going to happen, Lord. And I had a long a period there of several weeks where I really struggled with this, because I had seen back home in Illinois, where I'm from, we had planted a church years before with another couple, and I had seen our best friend Pastor Mark go from he was kind of the children's pastor with these campy little sermons, and he stepped into a whole new anointing in one day, and he genuinely loved on these people at this little missionary church we planted, you know, between two biker bars on the railroad tracks in the wrong side of town, you know. And I saw the love he had for these folks, and I knew that I didn't have that. I could preach, I can teach, I can do discipleship, I can do counseling, I could all of that, but I didn't have the love for these people that I saw in Pastor Mark. And so in 2013, 2012, when I felt this call to full-time ministry, I said, but Lord, I don't love them the way I saw in Pastor Mark. And he said, you will when they're yours. And so my wife was in agreement. We started sending out, doing the regular, job search thing, sending out resumes. I sent out 12 resumes. I got one response back. It was from this weird place in Florida called Faith Farm Ministries.
No kidding.
And
you sent out 12, you got one, and it was Faith Farm.
Yeah.
Somebody just knew that you were the right person, didn't they?
That's how it looks. And so, and we're from a Pentecostal background, okay? And so in Pentecostal circles, when you're trying to make a very important life decision, you want a word of confirmation from someone who moves in prophetic gifts or something. You want this to be confirmed, right? You're not going to just go out and on a whim do something big like this. And so if you're trying to make a life decision, you've got one or two confirming words, you can have great confidence that this is the will of the Lord for you. Well, we had to start writing them down. We ended up with 33 confirmations that we were supposed to move 1,000 miles away from everything we knew and raise our children in rehab in the hood in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And that took a lot of courage. at the same time, there was a women's addiction recovery program where we were that had heard about me and called me up and said, "You're hired." They didn't even interview me. They just said, "You're the guy." And
but you'd have to stay there.
it was more money in a beautiful location up on a mountain. It was just gorgeous. What a wonderful opportunity. But I got to where I had to tell them no before Faith Farm called and told me yes.
Wow.
And that took faith.
Oh, it did take faith.
And so we, again, 33 confirmations, and we had to just step out in faith and know that this was the call of the Lord upon our lives.
My goodness.
And he has confirmed this to us again and again and again.
They made the right decision. I can see that, and I'm so thrilled. So I just have to tell everybody, don't forget to go to the thrift store that they have. They have one in Fort Lauderdale. They do have one, of course, the big one's in Boynton Beach. And if you get a chance, find Dr. LIDWELL when you're in Fort Lauderdale, Doctor. See, I keep doing this to you because
you're just prophesying over me.
No,
It's going to happen.
It has something to do with
It's
you.
gonna
I
happen.
guess so. Pastor Douglas LIDWELL, director of the Fort Lauderdale campus. It's been such a joy to have you on my show. Thank you so much.
Privilege has been mine.